All right, and everything is looking good on my end. So, Tyler, how's it going today?
Oh, it's not bad. It's not bad. Hold on. Let me Twitch stream. There we go. Hey, now we can actually
Oh,
talk.
yeah. Last thing I want to hear is me.
Same. Yeah. I don't think either one of us are that narcissistic.
All right. So, thank you all for joining us today. This is the first official episode of the Standard Array. So, consider yourselves, privileged. You are here on the ground floor.
The VIP placards are in the mail, except they're not actually in the mail.
So, we can save shout outs for the end whenever we can plug all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so what the Standard Array is going to be a weekly D&D podcast that is hosted here on All Things U, the Twitch stream for the All Things U community. Um, Let me see. And speaking of which, there's my chat box. Okay. Sorry, everything is all layered, and I've been adding new layers, and yay, technical. But anyway, so
Right.
week, probably on Saturday, we are going to be hopefully, we're going to be able to live stream an episode, depending on how work schedules go. We might need to pre-record these in the future, so just keep on checking either the r/the Grimbard or r/all things u, or the All Things U Discord. The stream announcements channel has information about any time that we are about to go live. So all of the social links should be right down below, except for the Grim Bard. But if you go to any of those other places, his stuff is not hard to find. Anyway, so today we are going to be talking about a few different topics that are really crucial to getting started in a role play, and that is the rule of cool and yes and. And as we go through, we're going to define what those are and their D&D context, so don't stress out about that. But well, why don't we just jump right into it? We wanted to start off talking about the rule of cool. Now, rule of cool is something that it actually translates outside of just Dungeons and Dragons. It's a principle that probably originated in literature way back when, but has since found its home in TVs and movies and all of that. And all that rule of cool is saying that we want something unrealistic to happen. We want something ridiculous and over the top to happen. So, for the sake of something cool, we need the audience to suspend their disbelief. We need the audience to accept that, under normal circumstances, this probably wouldn't be possible, but for the sake of this moment, we're going to set that aside and just let this happen. Okay, so
Absolutely, it makes it more fun for everybody. It keeps you from having to operate within the same framework at all times, and it's a thing that Cooley and I talk about a whole lot. It allows you to follow the fun kind of wherever it leads.
yeah, like Gary Gygax.
Geralt from the Adventure Zone.
Oh,
Justin McElroy's character Taco's magical binacorn named Geralt.
yeah.
He abused the rules as written on Summon Steed for. That's a perfect example, Prinny. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and that leads us to, so what are some common ways that you've seen a rule of cool used in all of the D&D media that you consume?
So, I mean, that's I think really Prinny's actually hit on the classic example that I normally see.
Maybe he explains that. Let's explain that a little bit more for the listeners who may not be avid the Adventure Zone fans.
Right. So essentially, the Adventure Zone, which is played by the McElroy brothers, the team that creates My Brother and Me, a really popular podcast. It's three sons and their dad playing a D&D adventure. They're improv comedians playing D&D, especially in that arc. So they're not too worried about the rules. Period. Justin McElroy's character Taco is a wizard that throughout the series basically just casts spells without really worrying about spell components or is this a spell wizards even have? Because Find Steed is a paladin spell. It's not even a thing that wizards are supposed to be able to do. But
Yeah.
they were in this in the arc Pedals to the Metal, this Mad Max wacky racers racing death racing type deal, and Taco casts Find Steed and creates a talking kind of high attitude Binacorn character named Geralt. Just pulls it right out of his butt, and it would have been so much more boring if Griffin McElroy, the DM, had just said, "Oh no, that's not a thing that really your class is supposed to be able to do." So no, it literally it became one of the most beloved NPCs on the series, and it was from an instance of Justin technically breaking the rules of D&D.
Yeah. And
as I said,
oh, go ahead.
One sec. As I said, their table has kind of the compact, the rule, the understanding that they're very rules light. So it's more acceptable on a table like that to just say, I cast whatever I want. Some tables it's not going to be as allowed, and that's fine. But it fit their style, which is really the point. It made them happy, it made their audience happy, and the whole point of D&D is to have fun.
I gotta say, like, me not even, I think that's maybe the first time it ever even occurred to me that it's like, wait, that's not a wizard spell, is it?
Right.
Because, like, the group is just like, seems fine. Like, let's just go with it. Let's have fun. And so, like, as I guess a part-time DM, whenever I hear things like cast a spell that he normally wouldn't be able to, I was like, ugh. I don't, like, kudos to Griffin for, like, letting it go and for having fun with it and, like, just making it be a part of the narrative, but at the same time as a DM, it's like,
right.
How do you let that go? And then whenever, let's say next episode Merle wants to cast a fireball, like, as a DM, where do you think, like, or how would you kind of manage that situation?
So you're hitting the nail on the head on the thing that we're going to talk about kind of later in the episode, but this is freeform. We'll just talk about it now because it fits. So essentially, yeah, my tables are a little more rules heavy than the McElroys. Like I like improv. That's the main kind of DM concept that I like to lean into. But yeah, if you're gonna cast a spell, I need you to have it in your spell book. If you want to use the spell in a weird way, I'll probably let you do that. Like if anybody has read the Dresden Files, a book series by Jim Butcher, Harry Dresden, the main character, is a wizard private eye in modern day Chicago. As a wizard, he has magic. And Butcher has Dresden use some of his magic in very creative ways. Like if he wants to make something very cold early on in the series, he doesn't really have any sort of ice magic, but he's really good at fire magic. So he uses fire magic to essentially draw the heat out of something to freeze it. Like, as a DM, I'm probably not going to let Rumfer, Cooley's Paladin in our game, just cast Freeze Them in Ice, a spell that he just makes up. But if he ever plays some sort of a pyromancer sorcerer type, sure, I'll let him pull the Dresden. It's a spell he already knows, but he's using it in a creative way. And finding opportunities to reward my players' creativity is one of my favorite things about being a DM.
Yeah. So before we get with too much into yes and let's get back on to Rule of Cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to divert us there, but
that's all good.
Yeah. So, what are maybe some of the favorite examples that you have from games that you've DM'd where Rule of Cool has just completely shifted not only your perspective on the game as the DM, but the amount of fun that the table was having?
Absolutely. And as we always say, the amount of fun is the scoreboard on D&D.
Yeah.
So There was a game that you and Trey and Alice were playing in, and a few other people. And again, as a Dresden fan, I like whenever I can include Mab, the Queen of the Unseelie Fae Court, in my games.
It's a fun game.
Y'all had oh, she was so fun to play because she's just weird and alien and just a blast because she was so far outside the normal realm. But y'all had done a very dangerous thing and traded some favors back and forth with her and done her a solid. So she gave you each a little amulet that when you broke it, lets you, in a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers-esque moment, transform your level. Y'all are maybe, what, level 8, 10, something like that at this time, Cooley?
I don't even know if it was quite that high, but yeah, like 7 or 8.
Yeah, something like that. It lets them, for one fight as a level 20 version of themselves. Which obviously I gave them the heads up before the fight so they could write that. But in that fight, I think it was Trey as Rod and Tackle, his Lorebard character, used his a spell slot that he normally wouldn't have access to turn Dusel, Alice's Minotaur fighter character, into a Tyrannosaurus Rex for them to fight this dragon, Verthanax. And it was weird. It was out there. Then Alex wanted to make a grapple check. And people know what T-Rexes are. They have arms like this. It's not really a thing. But Alex wanted to jump up.
P.S. Polymorph is broke.
Polymorph is so good. As someone who plays Bards, God, it enables some of my most fun moments ever. But essentially, Alice jumped up and latched onto the dragon's leg with her mouth, and the dragon starts flying around the room with the T-Rex just like, just dangling by its teeth from its leg. And I should have made that like a DC 25 athletics check with disadvantage at the start of every single round. But that was such a cool visual and a thing that I know Alice still like thinks about once in a while to this day, and that campaign was years ago, that it was a one-off moment. It wasn't a repeatable effect. She was not often going to be a T-Rex attached to a flying dragon. So I didn't feel like it was setting any weird precedents that I would have to deal with later. And for the sake of that cool visual, it happened, absolutely. I let her make attacks while she was attached to it. Essentially, she and the dragon were fencing with each other with their claws as they were just flying around the room being shot at. It was fun, but it fulfilled all the rules of the rule of cool. It's a cool thing. It's player initiated, and it's not going to break things later. That's kind of my checklist for when I allow rule of cool in my game. What about you, Khalil? What's an example, either media or a game you've played or just a thing you've read that you've seen rule of cool applied in a way that you really enjoyed?
Well, there's 2 different examples that I could think of. One of mine is again, going back to the Adventure Zone, where early on in the story, the party is fighting a giant grinder robot. And Magnus just decides, like, I'm going to take a look around the room. What do I see around me? And the DM just happens to mention that there are chains drooped on the wall. He's like, I'm going to take those chains and throw it into that big grinder robot. Let's see what happens when he tries to grind up a bunch of chains. And I'm sure that Griffin had some like really cool fight planned, but whenever you do something that kind of, I don't know, instead of just being on tilt and trying to figure out some sort of justification why, no, this is my bad guy and you can't kill him on a technicality, like, he just went with it. Like, he said, yeah, that's a really cool idea, and I want to reward the players for doing cool things. And, oh, God.
Yeah, it ties back to, again, a thing we talk about a lot, be willing to tear stuff up as a DM. Like, Cooley, you, and I think the first time I ever DM'd for you, when you were playing as Erasmus Tinkerput, little gnome wizard dude, I had an enemy that you cast a spell magic on his crown, where he was getting his power from.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what the rule was, so I was going to err on your favor, and I'll let you dispel magic on the crown, which turned my CR whatever badass enemy into a CR 1/8 commoner with 10 AC and 10 hit points, who you then very quickly killed. Uh, but it's again, like, you wouldn't remember that fight years later.
Yeah.
If I just had you fight the guy.
Yeah.
Because you did something cool, it worked. Those offhand descriptions, because it was just literally theme. Like like Griffin, I had made some offhand comment about it looks like he's channeling his power from his crown, and you're like, oh, I dispel magic. Oh crap. Offhand comments are also often the on-ramp onto the interstate or rule of cool that players will use to just completely invalidate your plans.
Yeah. There is one thing that I wanted to make sure that the one point that I really wanted to make about rule of cool is that like, I think that if you're playing 5th edition, you have an obligation to use it, because the big thing that they added in 5th edition is the idea of advantage and disadvantage. And from the very first supplement that they wrote, from was it Fandelver, the first thing that they put out?
What?
So was it Fandelver, that very first thing that they put out whenever it was still D&D Next and not 5th edition?
Right, the old playtest version, absolutely.
Yeah. So in this playtest version, they start to talk about like how to get advantage, and it's completely subjective. As a DM, you're supposed to be looking for opportunities to award players for being creative. This is really what's supposed to set 5th edition apart from not only all of the other iterations of D&D, but really from any other role-playing game. I mean, I'm not exactly like I don't know I don't know everything about every tabletop RPG, but I know, like, going from 3rd edition to 4th edition to 5th edition, that's what made it stand out. And so,
right.
I would say if you're not looking to utilize those cool moments, if you're not looking to give your players advantage, or as a player, if you're not looking for opportunities to gain advantage, you're kind of playing the game wrong. I mean, it's like page 1 of the rule book.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's one of the many fun things is, as a player, it's trying to, in good faith, which we'll get into a little bit later, trying to find a creative way to do something. And as a DM, when your player is in good faith trying to find a creative way to do something, absolutely reward them.
Yeah. So that's all
baked into the bones of 5e.
Exactly. That's all that I really wanted to. That was my one talking point. I really wanted to make sure that I brought up there. But let's move on to now. There's a principle that I'm sure you have heard kind of flippantly tossed around in all sorts of media. Like, I know this gets used in podcasts and any meta references to, like, improv comedy, is the rule of yes and. And all that's saying is instead of me saying, oh, I don't like that idea, I don't like where this is going, I'm going to respect your creative efforts, and I'm going to say, okay, yes, this is happening, and how can we build on this? Okay, so, yeah, you can take it from there if you want to talk more about D&D context.
Absolutely. So it's if you've ever heard me and Cole talk about D&D before, we like to play our games where I'm not reading them a novel that I wrote. I'm not running them through this cool plot that I wrote. We are building a story together. Me as the DM, they as the players. It's our table, not my table. And part of that is, I feel like my job as a DM is to set an interesting scene with a few different buttons for them to press in it, and then introduce a conflict. And then at that point, what the players do with the tools that I give them in that conflict, and just the stuff they pull out of their butts, it's my job to build around that with them. Like, there's a really good example from 2 sessions ago in our Eberron game of the yes and thing, without going too deep into a recap of our game, the party may or may not have killed a murdering police officer, and may or may not have been caught doing that by a few different people. So I had made, as I referenced a minute ago, an offhand comment about how the kind of corrupt guard captain and a bunch of the guards and the leadership of the guards were in the morgue examining the dead guard's body. So Cooley, as his paladin, Rumfer, was like, oh, so that means that the guard center, the guard barracks, is understaffed right now. Cool. I go to there, and I want to look for essentially files, look for evidence. And I didn't have any of that prepared, but I was going to be damned if I didn't let that happen, because it was way cooler than any of the ideas I had for how they were going to catch this guard captain in the act of being murderously bad at her job. So, like, Alice posted up outside as her Artificer Cove to give a place to retreat to. Trey, with his rogue, went in and kind of helped with some deception stuff. And Cooley busted in there like an elephant from internal affairs, just give me this, give me that. I want to do this, blah blah blah, and just rolled very well on these checks. Like, I made him still work for it.
He's very
fun if I just give it to him. He's very persuasive, and angry 8-foot-tall elephant men are generally very persuasive when they're angry. So he went in there and he took these files that didn't exist until Cooley had said he was looking for them.
That's my favorite part of all of that, is even at the end of that session, did you know what those files were?
No, I had a note like, figure out what the hell is in those files, so I could figure it out the next day. Because you and I were going back, like I gave you a premise: bad guard, corrupt, figure out how to get her. You said, cool. Yes, that's the thing, and here's how I'm going to do it. I said, yes, you do that, and this is the situation. You said, yes, and we built a thing together that was greater than the sum of its parts. That's what yes and lets you do. If he had said, I go to the guard headquarters and look for files, and I said, no, that won't work because there's still enough guards there to keep you out, it's not nearly as fun. Like, you still would have caught her eventually, but it's not as fun, and it's not something we both own.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you used that word, own, because there's a lot of misconceptions about how D&D works. Tyler was just describing it as a back and forth. It's not a game that is owned by the dungeon master.
Right.
It's taking ownership of your own, like, collaborative storytelling. Oh, that's okay. But anyway, it's saying, like, yes, we are going to collaborate. We're going to tell this story together. It's not all the DM's responsibility to do all of these hours worth of prep and then just hope that, like, everything works out, right? And, like, the more that you DM, the less prep you actually have to do, and the more that you, like, get to know your characters, because you can kind of anticipating what they're going to want, but also accepting the fact that you can't always anticipate every single thing. Like, there may be characters that you've written out elaborate backstories that they never meet. And you just kind of have to be willing to say, it's like, okay, this isn't my story, this is our story.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's got to be a give and take. I mean, our game belongs to the four of us equally, as far as I'm concerned. And to your point, as a DM, one of your jobs, one of the features on the DM class is figuring out where the little epinephrine buttons are in your players' heads, the little make them happy buttons. And when you see an opportunity to press them, press that damn button. If they like doing weird off-the-wall stuff, if they like making the NPCs laugh, if they like meeting NPCs, if they like doing cool stuff in combat, figure out what makes them happy and put that in the game. Give them the opportunity to do the thing.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you blinked out for a second. I think you're back. I see you.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. So, could you just repeat that last sentence for us?
No, because I don't remember what I say.
Okay. Well,
Essentially, it's your job to find opportunities to make your players happy, figure out what makes them happy, and then it's your job as a DM to put that in the game for them to interact with and use.
I think that where a lot of people come into D&D with misconceptions is from the outside. It looks like it looks like a competitive storytelling game where it's the players versus the dungeon master, and that's not the case at all. It's very, very collaborative. If the DM's ultimate job is not to win, it's to make sure that everybody at the table is having fun.
So I don't know if anybody here has watched much Dimension 20 on Dropout, but Brennan Lee Mulligan is the DM for that, and Brian Murphy and Emily Axford from NADPOD are cast members on their season Fantasy High, and Brennan Lee Mulligan is a master at he walks two lines very well at the same time. He's a huge fan of the players and a cheerleader for the players' characters, while also holding them to an appropriately strict set of rules and using rule of cool. So there's consequences. So the players can fail because it's not really fun unless you can fail. But he's such a fan of his players and knows how to make each of them happy that he can put little nuggets in there that the players have a broad latitude to do stuff. And he's very much rooting for them, but will happily kill their characters if they do something too stupid or fail too hard. So it's not just like, oh, we're going to play Happy Calvin Ball where there are no rules and it doesn't matter and Rumford gets to do whatever he wants, because that'll get boring really, really quickly.
Yeah.
It's not fun unless you fail once in a while, or if you have the potential to fail. So if you're ever looking to see what a really well-managed rule of cool within a good framework looks like, Dimension 20, Dropout, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Fantasy High.
Very good. I've actually never seen that one myself. So.
Oh, it's real good.
I've got to find time to consume more media.
Yeah, a lot of their stuff is behind a paywall. The first season of Fantasy High is free on YouTube, but they have a six-shot where Matt Mercer, the DM of Crit Roll, is actually a player in it. But it's Matt Mercer, Amy Vorpal, and a few other people. They're playing essentially the bad guys from Lord of the Rings, fleeing from the good guys. Like they literally have Matt Mercer is basically playing a Nazgul in this game, and they're beating up on totally not Frodo and totally not Sam Ganges, and it's just God, it's funny. It's got airship battles and orcs and lava monsters. I mean, it's worth $5 a month. It's very good.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it. So, I guess at this point, we said we were going to try and keep this around 30 minutes. So, yeah, we'll open it up to the audience for any... Oh, did you have anything else that you wanted to hit on?
Yeah, there's one, and I'll try to keep this brief, but there's the backside of that, because somebody on Subreddit rightfully pointed out that it's like the rule of cool and yes and is also a way that tables get completely derailed and games get derailed. Like what I kept saying earlier with that caveat of when the players are acting in good faith, you can do the rule of cool and all that stuff. Sometimes the player's operating in either bad faith, they're trying to just gain an advantage for themselves, kind of at the expense of everybody else, which is against the concept that Cooley and I were talking about earlier, but you're winning as a collective in D&D. But also sometimes they might not be acting maliciously, but they're not going to know better, and they're trying to do something that will give them individually short-term fun at the expense of the entire table's long-term fun later. Like there's a story that somebody told me from another table that I wasn't involved in, where this group went into a town. This group of players went into a town, and instead of like exploring and finding all the quest hooks and quest givers and cool features, they immediately get into a fight at the tavern, because that's what low-level parties do apparently. And he punched the bartender and rolled a nat 20. And the magic nat 20 and the magic nat 1 might be fodder for another episode, because I could talk about that for an hour in and of itself. But the DM ruled that because he punched that bartender with a nat 20, he punched the bartender so hard that it killed the entire town. If that's how you want to play, that's fine, but giving 10 seconds of, oh, that was really fun for that one player to be the badass that punched a whole town to death. You've now established that physics just don't exist in your game. And any cool stuff that was going to happen in that town is now over with. And, I mean, like, without getting controversial or personal, like in Crit Role, a lot of people watch Critical Role. Early on, there's a character that saw Matt Mercer giving one of the players, Taliesin Jaffe's character, Percy, a big arc that was dedicated to Percy's backstory. And this player wanted, I guess, part of that spotlight and tried to use his backstory to solve the entire quest arc for Percy's quest arc. So that sucks for a lot of reasons. Matt clearly spent hours and hours and hours trying to build this awesome arc, the Briarwood arc in Crit Role Season 1, if you ever want to take a look at it. And if the other player had been able to just, I call in my father's army of Dragon Knights to just win, crap, that's not fun. What is that? That's radio poison. That's awful. Yeah. That's bad D&D. So you have to, part of learning how to apply the rule of cool and yes and is learning when to say no. But it's a spectrum. Like it would have been a bad idea for me to say no to Rumford busting in and finding those files. It was a great idea for Matt Mercer to say no to that player for trying to derail Percy's arc before it even started.
Yeah. I think that this will probably be a conversation before whenever we talk. I assume we're going to talk about the Nat 20 and the Nat 1, but you can't completely lose focus of what those numbers mean. Like 10 is what a normal human is capable of. Like anybody could achieve a 10. That's average, right? Now a 20 is supposed to be like the furthest limits of of what you could take something, like or basically of what is possible. And so I guess that's the question that you've got to ask yourself is, okay, in the ideal circumstances, is this possible? If so, right. Sure, rule of cool. If you're going to give godlike powers to someone for one dice roll, probably need to tap the brakes.
Yeah, and that might be our next episode is Nat 20s and Nat 1s, because I have a lot of examples that I'm not going to burden this thing with, but it's just the thing that I want to re-hit on that one more time before we go to the Q&A is follow the fun, but make sure that the fun you're following is long-term sustainable fun, and you're not sacrificing 10 fun units for 3 fun units, if that makes sense to kind of quantify it that way. It was fun the entire time for you to go raid those files. It was fun the entire time for Dussel to dangle from that dragon's claw, and it didn't take away any later fun.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not mortgaging your future fun.
Yeah.
If you say that every time somebody rolls in that 20, everyone within a mile radius dies, you've probably mortgaged some of the future fun in that campaign. Because you're going to have to treat it roughly the same, or else people are going to be pissed that, well, Billy got to do something cool and he crit, why don't I?
Yeah, that's not sustainable. All right, well, thank you very much for your thoughts and feedback on that. So, again, I know I kind of jumped to the gun earlier, but yeah, if you've got any questions as far as rule of cool and yes and, or even the counter to yes and, the no but.
Mm-hmm. My wife tells me all the time that I have no but, so I should be an expert at answering questions about it. And if you have anything, any D&D related anything, even if it's not about what we just talked about, answer it. That's literally what we're here for.
All right. So while we're talking about that, or while people are maybe pondering or typing their questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Grim Bard?
Cool. So in my subreddit, which I'll type into the chat, second. Dr. J,
That's fair.
I really just need to play to understand anything. That's real fair. It's one of those. So we talked about this last time, Cooley and I, that D&D can be really overwhelming. And it'd be very hard for either Brian or I, and Brian's an excellent teacher, to describe to you, okay, here's what you do and here's your flowchart for how to play. But Cooley, correct me if I'm wrong, give me your thoughts on this. Once you hop in, especially on 5e, within a session, it's easy to be like an okay D&D player, like within your first session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like as soon as you start understanding like who a character is, how to use their skills, I think that like combat is one of the least important parts of understanding D&D, because that's just, okay, we need more than one dice roll to resolve this situation, whereas like a perception check or a deception check or those types of things only require a single dice roll. Like combat is one of the more complicated things, but honestly it's one of the least important. Just
agreed. And I know we said we're going to hold this to half an hour, but Dr. J brings up a really good point that literally everything we said was over his head. And Cooley and I have known Jay for a long time. He's never played before, which is we're going to solve that pretty quickly. But if there's one takeaway from all this rule of cool and yes and stuff, you don't have to worry about rule of cool as a player as much. Just when you find a creative thing to do it.
Yeah.
If you want to get across, if you're trying to get across a room to fight somebody, if you can either just try to run through them, or you can swing on the chandelier to get to them, pick the cool thing. That's all rule of cool is for a player. And the yes and is like when you're playing in that game with Prinny and yeah, absolutely, Prinny. I grab the pickaxe and swing on the thing. Like use what you have around you to make a cool visual, make a cool scene. But Dr. J, the yes and thing, all you really need to know on that as a player is if Prinny in y'all's game says, hey, I think that mountaintop up there has a griffin nest on it, don't go, no, that's silly. Say, yeah, and I bet if we go up there and kill it and grab a trophy from it and take it into the town, they'll pay us for it. So your job, you're not in a storytelling competition with Prinny. You're in a cooperative. You're building a story with Prinny. So you take the premise that Prinny lays forward, I bet there's a griffin up there, and you build a story with him. You say yes and. Julie, your thoughts on that?
I'll say as a brand new player, I think the best thing that you can keep in mind is don't worry about what dice to roll. Don't worry about saying like, can I do this? Like, just say like, okay, this is what I want to do. And between you and the DM, you can figure out, okay, well, you know what? This could probably either be athletics or it could be, I don't know, a general dex check or things like that. Like, don't get so worried with like needing to know how to do things. Just say, I want to do this, and the DM will figure out a way to let your character do it. So really, I think what I'm trying to say is the first person that you need to yes and is yourself. Like, let yourself have these big ideas. But.
So to put it another way, because Dr. J, I know you're a video gamer. I sounded like an 80-year-old man. You're a video gamer. You play them video games, but I know you're a gamer. So to Prinny's point about using a pickaxe to swing on something, this isn't like a PlayStation where you have to click the square button to use the pickaxe to swing on the chandelier. You don't have to know what button you're pressing. You just tell Cooley, your DM, I want to swing on that chandelier using the pickaxe, and he'll tell you, cool, that's an athletics check. Roll a d20, and then he'll even help you with what to add to it. Just don't worry about looking at my character sheet, what button can I press? As Cooley's saying, give Cooley or whoever's DMing the action, the DM will tell you what to roll and what to do. We're here to help you and to make the story fun, make the game fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I especially know, like, with where y'all are going, you're already thinking about D&D from a cinematic perspective, Because whenever someone says something like, well, I want to be Captain America or I want to be John Wick, you're already thinking about what that looks like in your head and how far you can push the boundaries of the game. So just say, here's what I want to do, and we'll just like, okay, cool. You know, we even, like, there's just like, sometimes we don't know what to roll. So Tyler likes to use a luck check. Like, it does, just a general on a scale of a 1 to 20, like, are you lucky enough to make this happen? Like, that's not even a thing that's in the game.
No, that's a thing I stole from Brennan Lee Mulligan. That's just, if I estimate as the DM, this has a 60% chance of happening. Cool. Roll a luck check. If you roll a, I don't know, 6 or higher on a D10, 6 or lower on a D10, it happens.
12 or higher on D20.
See, me no math, he math, me talk. That's different skill sets there.
Okay, so I don't know why I'm gonna. Thank you.
Lies you tell, Bernie.
All right, so C. Heron wants to know, what do ability scores mean in real-world terms? If I have 20 charisma, am I a sot, or do I have a powerful personal presence? If I have an intelligence of 9, can I read?
That's an excellent question, phrased in a very funny way. I like that very much. Cooley, what do you think about that one?
Wow, 20 charisma. That one actually is tough. I think the general standard on intelligence is if you have an 8 or lower, then you're considered illiterate. Is that right?
Basically, and it's one of those things where don't let the prescribed rules.
Right.
So, and Cooley touched on earlier. So, for those of you who have never played D&D, your character scores are on a scale of 1 to 20. 1 is theoretically the lowest you can have, and 20 is the highest you can have. So 1 is, if you have a 1 in intelligence, you are as dumb as a living thing can be. If you have an intelligence of 20, you are as intelligent as a non-divine being can be. If you have a 10, you're dead-ass average. So you can apply that for charisma and whatnot either. If you have a 20 charisma, you would be among literally the most charismatic human beings who have ever walked the planet. You're Morgan Freeman. You're walking around. You can convince anybody to do anything you want. You're Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury is a bard with 20 charisma. You know what I mean? Dick Cheney has 1 charisma. It's just you know what I mean? There's different sides of the spectrum. An intelligence or not, I would rule that you could read, but really, as a DM, what I would ask you if you came to a table with a int of 9, or intelligence score of 9, 8, 7, or 6, I would ask you, Aaron, do you think you can read? Do you want your character to be able to read?
Yeah.
Does your character think they can read, but they can't? All those could be funny.
Yeah, and something that, like, intelligence is a measure of book knowledge. So if you're looking at a stat block, then you would see something like, this wolf has an intelligence of 4. Like, it's like, well, yeah, it's a wolf. Like, it doesn't have unmeasurable intelligence by human standards.
Dr. Wolf, PhD. That's not a thing. It'll have a fairly high wisdom score.
Exactly.
Because wisdom is tied into perception. Wolves smell real good. Like, they're good at smelling, not necessarily that they smell like lilac or pine needles or anything. But that's a baseline. And if you think of it as every 2 points is a mechanically noticeable difference in intelligence. So 10 is average intelligence, 12 is, okay, you're a little bit above average. 14 is, you are noticeably above average. 16 is, wow, you're smart. 18 is, damn, you're real smart. 20 is, you're Stephen Hawking. You are as smart as it is possible to be without magical BS. Brittany, I would hope so. Also, you have a math degree. Do not lie to the chat. I know for a fact you have a math degree. And if a wolf can outsmart you, if it ever grows opposable thumbs, we're doomed as a species. So I certainly hope you can always outsmart every wolf.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question, Sea Heron.
Excellent question.
And I'm going to have to tinker with my filters again. I tried to make them as unrestrictive as possible, or the least restrictive it could be, and it still filtered thought. All right, any advice?
Heron with another great question, who wants to encourage on this character development, role-playing, and creativity. So, I don't know how many people in this chat have watched Crit Roll, but there are... I'm not going to cite any specific examples because I don't want to bog this down, but that podcast is often, that show is often a great example. Really, in it, like a NADPOD or Taz, a lot of those players, what makes them great players is their ability to not only set up cool scenes for themselves, but set up cool scenes for their fellow players, and even a lot of times set up cool scenes for their fellow for their DMs. So advice for players that want to encourage another character's development. So, like we talked a little bit about my favorite player that Cooley's ever played, the good Reverend Creflo Dollar, the prosperity gospel scam preacher. That's not a judgment on the actual Creflo Dollar, though I do also think he is a prosperity gospel scam preacher. But Cooley's literal
sheer coincidence. Don't at me.
I'll at you all I want. But like a lot of the other players were really good at, okay, so I've got this morally gray, let's be charitable and call Creflo morally gray character here. What moral quandary can I put in front of Creflo to see what Cooley does with it?
Mm-hmm. That was a lot of fun.
Like Gunter, the NPC. Yeah, exactly. Like Gunter, the NPC that I would always play, was whenever we had a moral quandary as a party, I'd have Gunter look at him, Creflo, what do you think we should do? What's the right call here?
Yeah, they would even if Cooley be like the rogue, like the most like the least trustworthy person, be the moral compass of the group, just because they knew that it would lead to fun moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, go where the fun is. I knew that Cooley would be able to come up with something cool, and if I wanted actual moral advice, it would be I'd go to Dussel probably in that group. But if I wanted
the Minotaur Luchador,
yeah, exactly, / librarian. So that's an example. If you have somebody that's really good at intimidating NPCs into doing stuff, like a fellow player in your game, when you're trying to haggle, bring over Brutus the Barbarian. Hey, Brutus, this guy doesn't want to give me a discount. What do you think about that? And that lets Brutus's player just be like, all right, and just like gives them a scene starting spot. So be always looking for a spot where you can be like, oh crap, this player really likes doing this. How can I steer us in that direction within the framework of the game?
Yep, play to your strengths, and that doesn't necessarily just mean you. It means to the party, or even like to the DM's strengths.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a good point, because as we said, it's not... I love Matt Mercer to death, and this is, again, potentially another episode, but the Matt Mercer effect is a thing that I've seen on the internet where, especially new D&D players who come to the game through Crit Roll, expect the DM to just weave this intricate tapestry, and that the party is just going to sit there and passively consume it, which anybody who has actually both DM'd and watched Crit Roll knows that's not what Mercer's doing. Mercer's fantastic at the game, but the game comes off so well because Sam Riegel and Laura Bailey and his fantastic players work with him back and forth. Mm-hmm. So if you ever want your DM to be Matt Mercer and are wondering, why isn't my DM as good at Matt Mercer, also think, why as a player am I not as good as Sam Riegel? How can I set the DM up to do something cool and interesting for the rest of the party? And at this point, Prinny just is trying to get us to do tongue twisters in the chat. And, yep, William, the woefully warm, wary warlock werewolf. You absolutely follow your truth, Prinny. Live your truth. As always.
And also, if you expect me to be Matt Mercer, you better be willing to pay me enough to quit my day job so that I can spend 40 hours a week on DMing.
No. Absolutely. Well, cool. Within the next 30 seconds or so, if there's any more questions, we'll answer them,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But in the meantime, Cooley asked me a minute ago about r/the Grim Bard, and it's r/the_grim_bard. It's my subreddit over there on the reddit.com. I'll be posting articles, DM advice, player advice, uh, eventually one-shot modules. Well, my big project, one-shot module for people, I keep forgetting to not talk like everybody's played 20 years of D&D, is essentially, you know what a campaign is, which is a string of sessions in together that tell a whole story. A one-shot is meant to be done all in one shot, in one session. It's a self-contained story that doesn't affect anything outside of itself. So if you have nothing to do or free time, thank you, Heron. I really appreciate that. You can just play a one-shot with your friends, and you don't have to worry about, man, am I setting up something narratively cool? Just how can we have fun within the premise of this one game? So I want to write some of those one-shots. I have some ideas kind of rattling around in my head, and ideally on this stream, I'd then like to play test some of them before I spend all the time formatting them into cool, freely downloadable PDFs, and see what they look like when you actually slap them on a table.
All right. And yeah, for those of y'all that have not been to his subreddit, again, good time to get in on the ground floor because you are already blowing up over there. Last I checked, you were up to like 115 followers.
Yeah, it's a little shocking and overwhelming, frankly. I wasn't really ready for that, but I'm not mad about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And while you've got an audience, why don't you go ahead and plug your newest project or the newest member of the Grimbard family?
The bestiary I'm working on, or what?
Oh, I was talking about your Patreon.
Oh yeah. So I did a thing. I posted an article about using defined combat roles to make it easier to DM and to make more tactically interesting combat encounters. Like for you people in the chat that are going to be playing in that game coming up, Cooley is going to be DMing a Lost Minds of Phandelver game, and he's going to be using stat blocks that I write that are going to eventually go into that bestiary that I'm going to also write. I'm going to be using that kind of those custom stat blocks and those enemy roles, like y'all play video games, a lot of you in this chat, like strikers that do damage, defenders that defend, and building kind of a tactical Dark Souls-esque, like strategy game-esque combats. So a guy responded to one of those and asked where he could go to give me money, and I didn't know how to respond to that because I wasn't ever expecting to get money from this. But I made a Patreon. He subscribed to it, so I have a Patreon now. It's you can find it on my Reddit. A link to it. It's I don't even have the URL for it. It's patreon.com/the_grim_bard, so very similar to the Reddit. But if you want to have a whole lot of input in what I write, and even within the things I write, a lot of feedback, if you want early access to some of the stuff that I write, go ahead and if you want to, become a patron. It's everything I ever write is going to be available for free. So I think that's important. But if you want to help me spend 20 hours a week instead of doing this instead of 5, so I can make more stuff, that is the way to make that a thing.
Yeah. So, and also, if you are one of the handful of people who has gone and watched these VODs on YouTube, I will be putting links to all of not only the Grimbards, but also the AllThingsU community down in the video description. So if you're one of our YouTube fans, then look down there for those links.
Prinny asked, what's a video game? It's the thing that I have personally watched you play hundreds of hours of in our old house. It's the thing with the pixels and the controllers that makes you happy.
Who is this Video James?
Exactly. Where does he play with his station? Yeah.
And yeah, for those of y'all that have hung around, be sure to maybe toss a follow to this channel if you want to see more content like this, I also have my own subreddit, the same name as the channel, AllThingsU, where I want you to go and tell me what type of content you are interested in seeing on this channel, because so far unanimously the people want D&D, so we're going to do our best to keep it coming. But yeah, so follow the channel here, sign up for the subreddit there, and be sure to let us know what you want to see. Upcoming this week, I was going to try to have a Monday night watch party. Unfortunately, my work schedule did not agree with me. So Tuesday night, we are going to be having a watch party. So if you've had a stressful day at work and you just want to slip on your PJs and watch a big dumb action movie, then that's what we're going to be doing. Last time we did this, we watched Guns Akimbo, and it was big and dumb and fun. So hopefully, be looking. Oh, also, there's a link down below to my Discord channel where you can get announcements as far as upcoming streams go. I try to get those out as soon as I know that things are happening. Yes, Brittany, it was big, dumb, and fun.
And if you have ideas for what you want us to talk about on this stream, post it on either one of our Reddits. Get a hold of us somehow. We're looking, like, our whole point here is to make content that is entertaining and helpful to y'all. So help us out by letting us know what that is. We will be happy to do our best to create it.
Exactly. Yeah. So come. I know both of our goals is to be just representatives of community. So come and be a part of that, and let us kind of be your representation here on Twitch or wherever that happens to be. So, Tyler, thanks again for hanging out. I really appreciate it. This is
having me, buddy.
Like I always say, like, I don't really want to just like hang out and have people watch me play video games. My goal for this channel is to spend more time talking, and I'm so happy that you volunteered to be a regular here on the channel.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great week, and we will do it again next week. So pay attention to the socials, and we will see you then.